You have to get really rigid on the machine. You've got to really inspire people to work harder and smarter.
Thanks for tuning in to another episode of Go-to-Market Excellence. I'm Dan Quirk, and I'm with Josh Wetzel today. Josh Wetzel is the Chief Revenue Officer at OneSignal, the most widely used customer messaging and engagement platform used by 1 million businesses around the world for push notifications, in-app messaging, SMS, and email. And Josh owns the entire go-to-market engine at OneSignal, including sales, marketing, business development, and customer success. So we are super thrilled to have him on the show today. Josh, welcome to the show.
Dan, thank you for having me. I'm excited to be here.
Yeah, so one thing you said when we first chatted, Josh, that I thought was super interesting, I want to spend some time digging into today, is you said that there are two core, super important things for go-to-market leaders to be, and you need to be great at least one of those two things to be a successful chief revenue officer. So tell us what these two distinct qualities are and why you believe so strongly that you need to be one of these two things.
Yeah, I mean it's not rocket science. I think it's probably true of all leaders, right? You can lead by example. You can lead through rallying. I mean, you've got to be able to do this. But I think when we talked about it, from my standpoint within the kind of revenue side, in particular, when you're thinking about sales, marketing, customer success, like the customer centricity side, there's two core things, right? It's one is, and I think this is an undervalued historically, but becoming more important is building the machine. It's the operational excellence. It's understanding the process. Like how to engage with customers, and how does the process flow? And I think the more you're a product-led growth company, the more that's really important. But this is true in a bunch of different facets. And then the other side of it is I think what I might have said here was casting the vision, but it's really kind of more how do you develop the persona? How do you create momentum, excitement? How do you build a team, right? And the grassroots of that is like, how do you recruit your first person, your second person, your third person? How do you grow that and scale it to 30, 40, 50, 100 and keep people working together? I think those are two distinct skill sets. One is more introverted, for lack of a better term. One's more extroverted. But I think you've got to be great at one of those two to be really good, because you've got to be excellent somewhere, and then you've got to complement yourself on the other side of it. That's first and foremost critical.
Yeah, so what do you say is your specialty out of those two things, assuming that you bias more towards one than the other? And I guess if you look back at your career, when did you realize, hey, I think this is really where I excel, and what were the kind of indicators for you?
Yeah, I mean, definitely the casting, the vision, building team momentum, building team. That part of it has always been a strength. That it's just, I think it's a natural in my personality, and I think to answer your question, I probably even like when I was younger. I had a coach one time on a team tell me, it was like, hey, Wetzel, you're Mr. 411. I dial you for information. You're always chatting, keeping people excited, and so I think it's always carried through. And I think within work, it was a natural gravitational pull. Like I love being around people. I really early on found that identifying people's strengths and helping them find that path, whether they, oftentimes in my first, half dozen years of my career, it was like never managing. It was always a colleague or someone, but helping them find the path to having a bigger impact and success and personal satisfaction. I got a ton of joy out of that. And some of the things I look back on and I'm most excited about are what I've helped people develop themselves, and they've gone on to do great things, whether it's found companies and be success there, or building in their careers or whatnot. That said, I do think it's really important that you're thinking about the machine, so to speak, because if you're not mindful of that, it's hard. You cap out at a certain point. Like I think I had a great opportunity early in my career. I was at eBay in the early years, And we used to have this leadership training where they would take away all the kind of directors and above and send them away for a week to this like training sessions. You learn a lot about yourself. And in some of those sessions, they would bring in friends of the company, but senior leaders in other organizations. And I always remember this speech that Jeff Immelt gave us. He was the CEO at GE at the time. And he's like, people always ask me, how do you manage 110,000 employees? And he's like, it's easy, actually. I manage like the 100 people beneath me, and I have like files on each one of them. I know what they're good at, and I trust and to empower them that they're going to manage the 100 people under each of them, and so on. And that's how you build a really high functioning large organization. And I think that's really critical when you think about the machine. Is like you can only scale yourself to 20, 30, 40, 50, maybe 100 people, and then you've got to really rely on that below you. So you have to be mindful of both. I think you can't just be this like visionary rallying, like as we know, like the coach or the general. You've got to be able to you got to be able to be mindful and do both. But I think you have to be excellent at one or the other. If you're just kind of mediocre at both or average at both, it's hard to be excellent in your job.
Uh-huh. What do you think the people who, so you use the word mediocre, what are some telltale signs of mediocrity in the motivating and casting the vision kind of personality? What are some of the indicators of mediocrity that people might be able to look out for, and how would you advise them to level up, for lack of a better word, and be better at that more extroverted side of go-to-market leadership?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think everyone has to be true to themselves. Like you can't all of a sudden, whether you're listening to this and you're like, hey, I actually think I should be better at the vision thing. Let me go try to, get better at it. I think you have to be true to who you are, and you just got to continue to work hard. But that's the important part, I think, is the authenticity comes in work ethic and the example you set. And if you set examples where it's like okay to slack off, or it's okay just to be like the rallying person, but you're not actually getting results, that's where the mediocrity comes through. And we've all been in jobs and times where you've been around people where you might really like them, or they might be really good at the operational part, but there's gaps, right? The organization doesn't feel right, the product isn't right, the momentum's just not there. And those companies, some of them can go on to be somewhat successful, but usually you see it in really slow growth or neutral growth. And that's not always the go-to-market leader's fault. Sometimes it very much is, sometimes it's not. Sometimes it might be a product or market condition. But I find that people, when I've worked for great people in this area, they're able to find and extract growth even in a tough environment. And I think when the environment's right, when you've got like the right TAM, right persona, the right product, you're kind of hitting it right. That's when you see 100, 150, 200% growth in large absolute terms. And that's
what's an example?
What was that?
What's an example? What's an example of what you just mentioned? Somebody who's able to extract growth even if in tough times. Like, how do they do that? Or what have you noticed that's unique?
I think you have to get really rigid on the machine. You've got to really inspire people to work harder and smarter. I always tell people, I don't think it's necessarily about, I'm not expecting people to work 100 hours a week and like, give up their personal lives. I want people to work really hard and be more efficient, so work smarter. And I think the companies that are able to extract more value out of the market they're in and ultimately outperform the market they're in are the ones that are able to kind of bring those two disciplines together, like making sure you're being efficient, and that's really in process and kind of like the go-to-market details, and then effort. Like people are actually, when they're there to play, or they're there to work hard and put in a strong day's work.
Mm-hmm. So you were brought in at OneSignal back in the summer of 2018, so a few years ago. When you came on board the company, were you charged with, obviously you were brought on, they knew you were a great leader, you cast the vision, you motivate the troops, you coach the team. Were you also charged with, hey, we got to get this machine really crisp and honed, and really understand the levers as well? Were you tasked with both things, or yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, it's a good question. Yeah, I mean, when I joined, and I love this kind of stage. When I joined OneSignal, we raised a Series A. We had a really strong adoption curve, but we hadn't started commercializing the product much. We didn't really have it. We didn't have a sales motion. We didn't actually have real SaaS pricing yet. We'd actually tested kind of some other business models. The product had been a freemium product to date. And so
Oh,
we had to build everything from the ground up, and so it's exciting. I mean, we had a Salesforce instance, and we had done some trials and experiments around what did or didn't work. We had some customers who inbounded and just said, "Hey, I want to pay for this because I'm a large company
that's
and
always nice.
I can't have." Yeah, exactly. It is always nice. That was actually one of there's already some nice little success. It wasn't pre-revenue, but it was pretty early. So yeah, I mean, I had to take care of everything, and I think you got to be scrappy, right? And that's what I like about that stage is it's all about execution. It's all about the result, and you got to try to do the things the right way, and you got to try to do them for sustainability. But you really got to do experiment, and the things that work, then you scale, right? And then you actually put the rigor behind them. So yeah, very much so. I think the nice thing about this company for me personally, and I would encourage anyone who's, when you're looking for your next job, you want to find a place where, you're going to work on a product you're passionate about. You're going to work with a group of people you can learn and grow from, and you can help them grow. And you're going to have the strong impact. Like you're landing in a role where your strengths are going to complement it. In this particular situation, I have partners here, whether it's co-founder and CEO, and George Deglin, our COO, co-founder Long, or our VP of operations, and Grace Lynn, who are really complementary of my skills and vice versa. And so it was a nice fit. And Grace is a new addition. She's been on the team almost 2 years now, but it was, and I was conscious of that. I think I'm at that point in my career where you really are looking like I knew I could have a big impact based on my skill set, but they were going to complement me really well. And I think that's really important. And it probably took me a good 10, 12, 13, 14 years of my career before I really got to that point where I knew what I was great at and what I needed to be complimented at in my role.
Yeah, do you remember when you realized it, and what that was like? What the thought process was when you decided, hey man, I'm really good at
Yeah, I
this,
mean,
but it's
I
okay. I
think
can throw my
life,
hand. Yeah. Sorry. Go ahead.
what was that? No, I was just saying, I think that life is it's like that life is a box of chocolates, each one you never know what you're going to get. But I think you're taking little tidbits from all these experiences. And if you're mindful and self-aware, like you obviously learn a lot more from failures. Like I selected this job and it just wasn't a good fit. I would say that, and I'm still friends with this person, but I went and took a job at a really early stage company, a company called Pinterest before Pinterest. I always like to call it. It's Polyvore. It eventually got acquired by Yahoo, and it was a nice product, great product. It was very much Pinterest before Pinterest, and it was like an app, basically an app that a lot of the Pinterest people use because they would create these like sets. But I landed there with 5 people or 4 people. I was the first basically non-engineer. And I was there to kind of help commercialize the housing market crashed. Like this was in, summer of 18, I joined there. And it was one of those experiences, and I'm calling this out because it was an experience where it was like cultural fit. I think I would have had an impact, but the timing wasn't right. The cultural fit wasn't right. And so it was that mindfulness of like, whoa, okay, I just came from this great company where I'd had this awesome success building this business. And now I'm like kind of starting again, and it's just not the right fit. And I end up leaving after 6 months. Again, still friendly with the co-founder and CEO of that business, great guy named Pasha Sadri. But that was one of those moments where I was like, okay, I know I know what I'm good at. I know where I'm adding value and I'm having impact. But culture is a really important factor, and also complementing my strengths and my weaknesses with my colleagues and the people I'm going to be interfacing with. That was one of those moments. And then, since then I've been really focused more on fine tuning what stage I like and
Yeah.
product. And I think ultimately I'm always kind of looking as I get bored to continue to challenge myself. And so I think that's just important as you get big, as you grow and get further in your career, like keep stacking these learnings and grow from them. Don't let yourself get stuck of like, this is what I like to do and this is who I am, and I don't really care who else is around me.
It sounds like OneSignal's been really an ideal fit in terms of stage and your skill set as a go-to-market leader. So when you first started in the first 3 to 6 months, when you started, you came in, you started building the team and casting the vision. Do you remember what some of your failures and learnings were in those first 6 months, specifically about the casting the vision side of being a leader?
Yeah, some of this stuff is pretty much painting the lines kind of stuff. It's like if you've got customers or users, in the case we had, it's talking to them, like looking at the feedback you're getting from them, like who are they, what are their roles, what problem are you solving. I was very fortunate, and we are fortunate here at OneSignal. We have a great product. It's used by a lot of people. You mentioned at the top of the podcast, million plus companies use us.
Millions,
We're
yeah.
delivering 10 plus billion messages a day. So we have a wide net of people. And, so the first 3 to 6 months was digging in with those customers, users at the time. So most of them weren't customers, and most of the companies using our product today still aren't customers, but asking them like, how do you use it, what's it solving, like understand the pain points. One of the things I did early on, we had a kind of a customer success account management job open, and when I joined, it was there, and I started talking to customers, and like they were having success with the product without us really having to manage that. And so I punted on that customer success account management thing and really focused in on sales. Quite frankly, at that time, we really had no sales effort. So we really focused. The first 3 months was kind of understanding pricing, but rolling out pricing, getting the self-serve engine in there, understanding what customers were or weren't working, really kind of getting the nuts and bolts in. And then after the next 3 months, we're starting to build a sales team, and we did that in the first quarter, roughly 6 to 8 months after I joined. I had a ton of success, but one of the mistakes I made, it was a year later, as we scaled up quite a bit, we started having some, I wouldn't say we just had a lot of customer consternation, I would call it. It wasn't necessarily even really churn. I mean, we had a little bit, customer here or there, but it was more like pain points. And it dawned on us at that moment. It was like, oh, okay, wait a second. We haven't invested in this. This was like a missed opportunity. Now it's time to start thinking about that. And so started building that there. And I was very deliberate about each phase. Like for me, the first phase was understanding the pricing and the value prop and the pain points, hiring sales. Then the second phase was, okay, we got to hustle and figure out customer success. But I did it in a very kind of deliberately broad way, because we have a very broad customer base. We have customers on every continent. We have customers that speak pretty much every language. I think we have a customer in over 120 unique countries.
Wow.
So I wanted versatility. Like I was trying to hire for people that spoke multiple languages and understand different cultures. And then we really focused on marketing. And I think now we're really starting to get back to customer success and building out the team. We now got a 5-person team, which is still very small for where we are size-wise. And so, ultimately, I think those are learnings you take, but you've got to, when you're building and you're scaling fast, you're constantly dropping balls. And the key is like, what balls do you drop? What are the most high priority ones to catch? And what are the ones that are like, I think the adage I used to hear was, it's like, you want to put out the forest fire, and the grass fire to your side, you can let that burn until it becomes a forest fire. I think that, if answering your question about like, what is it that, what is it that I did wrong? It was like there were some grass fires that became forest fires that I probably could have cut off earlier if I'd been on it more.
By the way, how many companies would kill for 5 customer success reps for 1 million customers? What is that, one for every 200,000?
Well, so
Awesome.
we have a million. We have like over 1 million companies that use the product, but we only have we're like 5,500 customers. So, but if you look at it, like so that's back to sort of the building the machine, casting the vision. It's like you got to be pretty operationally efficient. And so you got to understand like what are the right ratios, like how much revenue, how much revenue per customer success. Like, there's the whole sales compensation around quota and quota capacity and achievement, but you also have the management side, like what's the right ratio to retain and grow the base. And I think we probably were underinvested in that early. And today we're probably still a little bit underinvested ultimately. But it is what it is. You gotta, again, it comes back to the fire. Like, is it a forest fire or is it grass fire? I probably shouldn't be making fire references given the world we've been in the last couple of years here, especially I'm based here in California. So
Yeah.
it's not a joking matter, but from an analogy standpoint, I think it is, as you're building a business to be mindful of that. Like, you've got to prioritize what's most burning and what is something you can get to in a little bit.
Yeah, we're recording this in September, so maybe wait another couple months before you make those jokes about fires.
No joke, no joke. Just using
No,
it as a very apropos analogy there. So
I gotcha. So about a year into your time at OneSignal, you've made the hire for somebody to complement you on more of the operational machine building side of things. That's what you said that right. So what were some of the indicators to you at the time where it became, where was it pain points, or was it just bandwidth issues that you were like, man, I really need a partner to help on the machine building side?
yeah, good question. I was mindful of it very early on, and so some of the hires within the go-to-market org were thoughtful in this direction. And I think for me, the important thing was we had an amazing amount of data. We have 1,000 people that sign up for the product every day, and so understanding who those people are, how to engage with them, was top of mind. So I hired an engineer early on the go-to-market side, who sat in marketing, and hired kind of more operational kind of marketing people, and just to complement kind of what we need to do on the sales side. And we just kind of constantly experimented. I think the organization grew up where we needed somebody who was very mindful of just organizing stuff from like big things like board meetings and like broader kind of operational things to strategy sessions. And so we hired a VP who actually sits outside the go-to-market side, but is very much a critical partner for the entire organization, obviously, given that she owns a lot of these key functions. So it was less about timing and more about, as the organization grows, like, you've got to mature and you got to be mindful of making these investments. Sometimes it's painful because you're like, oh, I could hire this senior person over here who can supercharge our product efforts, or I can hire this senior person over here to help around I don't know, regional sales or whatever it may be. But you've got to be thoughtful about that and what it is. And I think one of the things we talked about earlier, and it's probably a segue at some point, is like enterprise businesses versus SMB, domestic kind of more based businesses, whether it's North America or maybe North America, Western Europe, versus global businesses. We have the fortune and the opportunity where from day one we were a global business. We had users in basically every country, every non-embargoed country in the world. People use OneSignal. And once we rolled out our self-serve solution, within a quarter, we basically had a customer in almost every country in the world, or close to it. And so you had to be mindful of like the operational challenges, from everything from the customer journey, right? Like, my belief is you want to turn every visitor to your website and to every conversation you have with a prospective customer into an evangelist of the product. That's the goal. But to do that with a global footprint is challenging, because you have cultures, you have languages, time zones. Like, there's a lot of practical, tactical stuff, and then you have like the strategic things around, like, as I mentioned, the culture stuff. And so we had to invest in that sooner than some orgs, right? I've been in teams where it's like enterprise centric, like you nail North America, you really US, and then you kind of like parse into Canada, you go to UK, you go to France, Germany, Australia. It's a very piecemeal. It's operationally challenging on the go-to-market side. Obviously, offices become that. So we had to invest there sooner. And in fact, even today we're 100-ish people, 100, I don't know, 510 people. And we've got we've got almost pushing a dozen people in the UK. We've got we got a couple of people in APAC. So we've had to kind of expand our footprint sooner than I've ever seen in a company of this size, like in terms of employee size. And it's because we have really strong customer adoption across the globe.
Yeah, you brought up the some of the challenges of a global go-to-market operation, and especially with the type of velocity you guys are doing as well. And so, I wanted to ask you about more on the operational side of it. A lot of SaaS companies today are housing the RevOps organization or sales ops, RevOps, reporting into the chief revenue officer, reporting to the CFO or the CEO, depending on the size. I'm curious what are the nuances at OneSignal that make it ideal for the operational role to kind of sit, I don't want to call it a silo, but it's in its own function outside of the revenue team.
Yeah, so I never think of it as terms of like functions or teams or where things sit. I think it's always about like the leaders and or like the collaboration points. And so yeah, like one example of this would be product marketing. In some organizations that are very business customer centric, where like especially enterprise, product marketing to me is always sits in marketing because it's got to be more client facing. It's much more about the nuances of the customers. They got to be tied. I think when you're a product-led growth or much more an engineering product-led organization, it's really critical for product marketing to sit within product because they're a liaison between customer and engineering ultimately in product management. But where they get their kind of energy and where they sit closer to would be important in terms of the nuance of what you're trying to convey and market. So I've been on both of those. I use that as an example because in our company, product marketing sits in product, and it was intentional by George, myself, because we felt like it's just going to help bring the product org closer to customers, which is critical because we have so many of them across the globe. In sales ops, same situation. Like it's been within the sales org, now it's within the operations org. And I think it's ultimately really it's smart to be there because we've got at least systems that take in place. Our back-end system, our CRM, we've got a customer support, we have all the sales orgs. We've got to have a tightly, and then we have finance obviously, but you have to have a tight system that's connecting all the self-serve customers to the direct sold customers, all the data flows, and quite frankly, like just making sure the CRM's updating the back end and whatnot. So it's a much more operationally centric play, so I've seen it I've seen literally my 2 jobs ago we had sales ops and finance. My last job we had sales ops and go to market. 3 jobs ago we had sales ops and go to market. Here early on it was within go to market, but today it's within the operations, and I think that's the right place for it given like the type of product we have and all the data nuances it requires. Because it needs to be there. And in fact, in operations here, we have business intelligence, we have data science, and they're doing a lot of work taking back-end information to make prediction models about not just lead scoring, but also stuff like, what's the propensity of this customer to be an evangelist for us, right? So we can outreach to them about upselling. What's the propensity of this customer to need more support, need more help, right? What's the likelihood that they're not doing this right? And in enterprise business, it's actually relatively straightforward. You might only have 100 customers or 150, 100, 200 customers. You can just call them, have conversations, go meet them. In our world where we have 5,000 customers and growing by 400 or 500 or more per quarter, then you've got to take a much more data-driven kind of automated approach to identifying the ones that need the most help. Or the happiest, and then evangelizing and basically the life cycle component. So those marketing and sales ops, BI, all the marketing ops stuff, that all has to be really tightly aligned and collaborate. And I think it's less about where they sit, but more about where they're getting leadership and direction from. So I don't know if that helps answer the question, but
yeah, no, I think it's an important thing to discuss because RevOps, quote unquote, is like, it's obviously function or a role that's catching fire. And it probably started years ago in Silicon Valley, but it's sweeping across, like things often do start there and then go. But a lot of companies are trying to figure out where to put this. I'm not sure if you saw the news of Sangram Vajra's new book called Move. It's a new go-to-market framework that he is putting forth, and at the center of it, the O in Move stands for operations, and he's a huge advocate now of like a RevOps being basically an executive function that leads the management meetings. They're the first ones that kick off management meetings and say, here's where we're at, month to date, year to date, quarter to date, and they're the ones that are kind of the glue between, and they're unbiased. They're the unbiased glue between multiple organizations. So, no, I think it's a super important conversation, but it's obviously different when you're talking about a pure enterprise company versus a company that sells to the enterprise and SMBs, and then when also and those are often sales-led, and then you've got product-led companies like OneSignal. And so I think everyone needs to figure out the right structure for their go-to-market motion. Yeah. And so yeah, it's a critical conversation. So for you guys, when you need, you go into a management meeting, is it your ops team that kicks off the meeting or that owns the data gathering and presentation of KPIs, or is that something that you have to work with somebody on that team to prepare for you?
Yeah, it's a good question. So it's the former. I would say you have to be careful though. I think, we have a weekly leadership team meeting. I would say it's like once a month, actually twice a month, that we go deep on kind of where we're at, review OKRs. We use OKRs for at macro level and functional level, and everyone on the team owns an OKR, basically has at least one for them. Not just leadership team, but even down to individual contributors. And so I think you can get like analysis paralysis too. Like I've been at orgs where you open every meeting with like, here's where you are in the numbers, but it's like weekly, they don't change that much. And you get caught up in the paralysis. And I think we do a pretty good job, I have to say, and I've been in worse situations, but we do a good job of balancing that with more strategic topics so that you're having ongoing conversations about like what's working, what's not working, both soft and hard. Soft being like, here's what I'm seeing, here's what we're hearing. Hard being like the data of like, okay, we've got less leads this week, what's the problem? Or the bookings are up, but it's this nuance, like why is that, right? And like kind of going deeper into that. If you stay on the data side, you can get lost in like this, data morass. And I've seen data where it looks good and you deliver a good result, but there's a leading indicator you're missing that is some trouble on the horizon, and vice versa. So you can't live in both. It kind of goes back to the machine versus the vision. Like the visionary sometimes get caught up in like, here's what we're doing, here's what's happening, and like the optimist, right? And the machine, you can get caught in the like, here's the data. You need to kind of blend those together. And I think that's important. But I like that. I've not read that book. I'll check it out. The Move book.
Yeah. It's you just released it on Tuesday, and it's available on Amazon.
Nice.
Not a paid promoter, obviously, but he came on the podcast last week, so it's on my mind.
That's cool.
Yeah. So for people who you just advise people to make sure you balance both of those things, so you don't get carried away too much on the vision and the I guess the feel good stuff, but you don't also get too carried away on the data and with analysis paralysis. Why do people get stuck doing one or the other, and what's your advice for people to break out of over biasing on one or the other?
Yeah, I think at the end of the day, it is about having an impact and delivering a result. And I think if you get carried away on either of those, where I see extremes happen is where you lose sight of just execution. You do just need to keep moving forward. Some days you move like a big step forward. Some days you move, a couple inches. But you got to keep moving. And I think if you get caught in the like, we overanalyze the data every week, you kind of get caught up in the like, I'm just analyzing in the data and I'm lost in the data. and vice versa. Like if you just get caught up in the optimism of this is working, but you're not actually executing. So I think that's why the blend is really important, because they working together, you get to that optimal result. And it's that's how you actually create the best machine. Is you've got to have the excitement, the momentum, the energy, right? Like just words and data can't drive that. You need the actual motivation, but the motivation has to be backed by science, right? It has to be backed by like this is what the numbers are saying, this is what the plan is, this is where we're headed, and then by the way, here's the result. So you've got to be mindful of both. Like I've been on teams where we rarely talked about the result, and some quarters are great and some quarters aren't, but you're kind of almost surprised at the end. And I remember thinking like, this isn't a surprise, like because we're not paying attention. I've always been in a role where it's like I've got to be mindful of the result. So when you're not talking about it, it's always not a good sign. And I think I learned early in my career, like I have to be vocal when things are not working, or when things are working, like celebrate success. That by the way, that's an underrated thing. I think a lot of go-to-market folks do celebrate success too much oftentimes, but I would encourage if you're not celebrating success, and that's what happens with building a machine. Sometimes they don't celebrate. That's where people they just like lose motivation, and they're just like, I'm leaving this company. It's just like I don't feel it. I think the best ones are you got to celebrate success as well.
All right, one last question on the operational thing. So you indicated earlier that you're an extrovert, you love casting the vision, you love leading the team, but you also have this great appreciation, and you've also had a strong hand in building the operational side, but you know when to pass it off and bring in a partner for that. For people who are listening and they're like, I'm not sure which direction I should go and which one I'm maybe better at, which one I should double down on. What were some indicators to you that the machine building operational side wasn't the path that you wanted to double down on? You already explained why you're the leader. You've always kind of been a leader and extrovert. What are some indicators for people who are maybe need to decide they don't want to go down the machine building path in terms of a specialty?
Yeah. Well, look, I think you have to be mindful of and have competence in both to a certain extent. It's just like, where do you get your energy from? Look, every time I'm interviewing somebody, I'm asking them like, what's the first thing you gravitate towards in each day when you go into the job? It's almost asking some of these like Myers-Briggs questions, like understanding where you are in the scale. So that's another thing. If like they're conscious of like, where do I get my energy, and like, who am I at my core? Like I would encourage them to look at things like Myers-Briggs and strength finders, and these are easy things you can go do for free and kind of get a sense of like where your personality is, where you get your energy, like who you are, how do you think. And that's really what I think at the core of it, like the team building side, is you've got to be, it's not just about hiring good people, it's about like having candid conversations with them and understanding where they're getting their energy, and learning from them, helping them learn about themselves and helping get them in those roles. So I think it's just having those, candid conversations with mentors or people you respect, doing some of these things to understand where you like naturally gravitate towards. Whether you believe in some of these psychological tests like Myers-Briggs or strength finders, it's sort of neither here nor there, but at least they're like directionally, they give you sort of sense of like, oh, I'm over here, I'm over there, and the different things about who you are. They've been great for me personally, and I use them a lot with my teams just to help people understand themselves. Oftentimes there's not a lot of ahas, but I would encourage that type of stuff, and then candid conversations. I think it's also just, again, going back to what I said earlier, it's like you might be really good at something. And actually, let me say this. This is important. Early in my career, I mentioned this thing at eBay, actually going through this leadership training. This was like mid-2000s they would train you all this stuff. One of the things that was like really mindful that I took away from a mentor there, but I've heard it in other places too, and I truly believe it, and there's a bunch of science that backs this up. Finding out what you're good at, what you're having a tremendous amount of impact, and doing a lot more of that will generate a lot more success for you personally and have a bigger impact for the organization, versus constantly thinking like, oh, I need to kind of level myself out over here, so I'm gonna spend a lot of time trying to do X, Y, and Z. So I encourage anybody like, stop thinking about like this Renaissance person mentality of like I can be like okay or pretty good in like a lot of different things. Figure out what you're really good at, where you really have an impact. Do a lot of that, and then complement yourself on the other things. Like I can't stress that enough. Once I learned that and figured out that, hey, just what you're good at, do a lot more of that. And if you're at a company where that's not impactful anymore, then find another company, find a problem to solve. Build a company and hire people that are going to complement things that you're not excellent at. But spending time on stuff that you're not excellent at, particularly stuff that you don't really have passion for, is only going to make you miserable and actually make you less effective in your job.
Yeah. I love that point. I've seen Gary Vee talk about that a lot too. He'll say, stop focusing on trying to fix your weaknesses. Like, just go hard at the stuff you love, go hard at the stuff you're passionate about, and that you have real skills in. And so I love that. And so obviously one of the things for you're a leader of sales teams, and you'd like to be a great coach. So I noticed on your LinkedIn profile that you recently got a sales coaching certificate from Winning by Design. I was just curious, tell us a little bit about that. What were one or two of the takeaways that, you obviously have had a great career, and so going back and getting a sales coaching certificate is I don't know, for lack of a better word, it's a humble thing to do, but it's also cool that you're still pursuing growth. So what did you learn from that, and what would you like to share for others who are thinking, who maybe are stalled out as a leader in their career? What could they learn from that?
Yeah, it's a great point. I forgot about that. I think when I stop learning, I get bored. And I learned that about myself 10, 12, 13, 14 years ago. And it's actually like my inflection point when I typically leave jobs. So I'm constantly trying to put myself in places where I can have an impact, where I can use my strengths, but challenge myself as well. And I think about that for every person on the team. Winning by Design is a sales consultancy around like persona work, playbooks, training. They're great. So, I'm not paid to say that. I legitimately think that. They actually produce books you can buy on Amazon or, at their bookstores that are really great.
I love the science-based sales
Exactly.
books. Those are awesome.
Sales and science. And then they've got like specific domain, like functional books. I've read them all, and we use them here at OneSignal, so we use them. So I went through the sales coaching to align with like our sales managers and our sales team and help, in any way I can. And it was good. It was like it's a refresh. Like a lot of these things it's like a sales process, and like, here's how to do it. Like I've gone through the Miller Heiman and a Challenger sale, and at previous companies you used Medic and all these different formats, and like learned them. And there's values in all of them. I'm not going to say one is worse than the other. I think again, it's like having a process and mapping your product, your value prop, your personas to it. That's what's critical. But I'm a fan of this stuff. I think it's always good to get different takes on how to approach growth and whatever discipline or function you're in. It was great.
That's awesome. And so, did you guys also hire Winning? You said you hired Winning by Design as a consultant.
They did work for us to help us evolve our sales playbook. So we had the playbook we built internally. The persona work we'd done pretty well because we had so many users and the buyers, so we had a good sense of that. But they were able to like really fine tune that, and then we took the team through the process. And I'd been training. Winning by Design knows this. I read those books years ago. And I'd been training the sales team myself early days with like 4, 5, 6 people with those books. So we'd take those books, we'd buy them for each person, we'd take out like specific lessons, we'd apply them to our own product. And that's how we were doing training. Pre-pandemic, we were doing that almost quarterly, but more intensive twice a year. And then post-pandemic, a little bit less. And then we did a full-on sales Winning by Design engagement where they mapped all of our process to their materials, and then took our team through the training. And then the sales coaching I went through was the standard thing that anyone could take for the coaching side, and anyone, a seller, can take their sales their open courses basically, and I recommend them. They're great.
Wow, that's great. And so what are you excited about with OneSignal looking ahead to the rest of the year?
Yeah, we're just continue to have an impact. It's amazing to have conversations with companies that you're impacting in different continents. Sometimes, a conversation with two or three customers on two or three different continents in the same day. And we're helping small, companies that are trying to build a big presence. We're working with some of the largest companies in the world to build digital messaging, right? They're integrating this deeply into their product, whether it's, crypto funds, whether it's, old school banks, media companies. We work with some of the largest sports leagues in the world, and some of the largest sports leagues in specific countries. And that's great. I'm a big sports fan, so it's nice to work with some of the leagues that I enjoy watching. Yeah, it's been tremendous. I love the team we built here and the people I work with each and every day. So I'm excited to continue to grow and build that, and just to keep the march. I think that's awesome about SaaS. I've been in some other industries and like ad tech and e-commerce. It's you're not dealing with massive numbers like in e-com. You can build a huge business really fast. But it's the recurring, the ongoing, sustained relationships you're building. Just keep, and so it's this amazing hike that we're doing basically to Everest. It's going to take 10 years, but when you get to the top, you're going to be like, a $50 billion market cap company and have this huge impact across, in our case, we'll have an impact across, 15, 20 million companies, hundreds of thousands of customers. And that's just powerful. Like 20 years ago, you could never have imagined that. I still look back and think about all these like digital internet companies that were like, I was at a company that got acquired by CNET back in 2000. CNET was like top 5 web property with like, I don't know, 7 or 8 million monthly unique visitors. Now 7 or 8 million monthly visitors is like, it's a
Peanuts.
It's like, yeah, it's like a province in China with a brand new startup website or something. It's like tiny. I shouldn't say that. 7, 8 million is still a large audience. But point is that we've come a long way, and software businesses being able to reach that number of companies, and then we're seeing billions of devices a week that our users are connecting to their downstream customers on, and it's just really powerful. It's cool to see the scale, especially at this size. Like I've worked at companies with large scale, eBay being one of them, but we're 10 billion messages a day, trillion messages, every quarter and a half or whatever it may be, is insane. So it's been awesome.
That's incredible. Well, continued success, Josh. We've had a few CROs on the show, but nobody who's a global go-to-market leader. So learned a ton today from you. Thanks so much for stopping by. And like I said, continued success the rest of the year and beyond. And we hope to talk to you down the road.
Yeah, thank you, Dan. Really appreciate you having me on. It's exciting. Have a great